Coming up on this episode, I'm joined by Lievin Ndimanyi to take a look around the NBA as we count down towards the start of the NBA regular season. We kind of go through some real or overreaction based on what we saw in preseason. We're talking Wemby, Dame Lillard, James Harden, Karl-Anthony Towns, the Lakers. For the Aussies listening out there, a bit of Ben Simmons as well. And for you Golden State Warriors fans, a bit of Jonathan Kuminga as well towards the end of the episode. But if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can follow me at POC252, that's POK252 on Twitter. Thanks again to Lee for coming on the episode. Hope you guys enjoy. Welcome, Lee. It's been a while between episodes, mate. What's been happening for you?
Mate, not as much as you, I reckon, with all that's been going on. The Pies on a flag, you've gone full-time NBA content creator, I'll call you now. So, mate, very quiet on my front, but big congratulations to you, mate. I've known you a while. These are two big dreams of yours. So, well done. I'll say it on air. I'll start there.
No worries. I appreciate it, mate. Yes, for those that didn't know, a couple of weeks back, leading up to the NBA season, obviously with my work that I've been able to do with Blue Man Hoop, now taking my content creation, as you say, on a full-time basis, and hopefully this podcast / YouTube and whatever else can be monetized at some point as well down the line. Looking forward to that whenever it may come. Let's jump straight into it. So we're going to do some real or overreactions here, based a little bit on the NBA preseason. We are now less than 48 hours away from the start of the NBA regular season, with the Lakers taking on the Nuggets and then the Suns taking on the Warriors. So we cannot wait for that. But let's get into some real or overreaction based on the preseason and some other stuff as well. And I wanted to start with, because I need your thoughts on Victor Wembanyama. So Friday American time, Saturday for me was the first time I watched him like a full game against my Warriors. After 5 blocks in 20 minutes in that final preseason game, is Victor Wembanyama your Defensive Player of the Year favourite? He's currently 5th favourite with Sportsbet at $11.
I also want to think that he can be a Defensive Player of the Year in his first year. Never been done. I even looked it up when you asked that question, but I think it may be too much to ask Victor Wembanyama, even after the 5 blocks in 8 minutes. A bloke who's... Because there's blokes that are incredibly like athletic and long and everything, but they just don't have defensive IQ. And I think it's the timing of his blocks and his jumping past. I guess if you've got a wingspan like his, you can jump in any passing lane. But you would have seen that steal that he had against OKC, where he like his whole body just stretched out. And I think his defensive IQ, he's going to win multiple Defensive Player of the Year. And I'll probably put the ceiling. I probably could see him making an all-defensive team, but. I mean, I think I've said every highlight of his I've been sending in the group chat. He is incredible and almost hard to believe that this is an NBA player. To win one of those major awards in your first year, so a lot has to go right first and foremost, and I'm a little bit worried that they will be quite protective of him in the first place. So I think that new rule, the 65-game rule, may hurt him. I think I'll be quite surprised actually if he clears 65 games. Obviously, with the frame of his that he has, and Spurs knowing they've got to think about the next 20 years of Victor Wembanyama, not just the next 6 months. So I think, so he may want to. So I just don't think this will be the year. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's year 2 and multiple at that. Did it scare you that much? Did you see enough in that game to make you think this is one of the best defenders in the game?
There's actually, I need to show you actually, there's actually a photo of me watching the game and just in complete bewilderment at what I was watching on both ends of the floor, but particularly defensively, because after that first quarter, like offensively, he was not overly efficient. He finished 8 for 19 from the floor, but we just haven't seen we haven't seen a prospect like him ever, but particularly defensively, like what offenses are going to have to do to try and maintain efficiency and try and get him out of the action as much as possible, because as you said, the IQ and the smarts based or combined with just the sheer size and length of the man, it is something we've never seen before. And the funny thing is, like with rookies, we normally see them come in and usually there's a transition period that they have to kind of go through when they enter the league. There's a transition period the league is going to have to go through with Victor Wembanyama. It's literally the other way around. And to me, there's no hot takes with this guy. I think anything you want to say about him could be legitimate. I saw, was it your brother in the group chat the other day who we were kind of going through all our awards and all our expectations this season? He just had Wemby for everything: MVP, Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, whatever else. And it's clearly taking the piss. But if you wanted to do that, like in another 2 years' time, like if you're telling me could he win MVP in his third season, right? Based on what I've seen in preseason and all the kind of expectation, I wouldn't be surprised. Like he could be an MVP candidate within his first 3 seasons. So it's almost like there's no hot takes with this guy.
I think Bill Simmons said he's going to be the most viral player. Like every night we will have a Victor Wembanyama thing, and I literally have never seen this before. I am so excited just as an NBA fan. Knock on wood, I get 10, 15 years of this Victor Wembanyama guy. The defensive IQ is another thing, but just the confidence alone, his jump shot, because I think you and I talked about how he has such a nice-looking jump shot. Even if he is not shooting the most efficient, the fact that he's still willing to go on there. And I think this is, I said to someone else, one of my favourite things, he had this pull-up, again, the OKC game. And I guess with his frame, it looks KD-esque in the way that he pulls up. But I think I love seeing that this next generation, obviously they grew up watching the Kevin Durant's of the world on there, and he would have had these crazy talent that he's been able to watch over his lifetime already, and what he can be in his first year. We could literally dream up anything, and he could do that. So I'm very excited. But to answer your original question, maybe not, but I'll probably could come to regret this take in a few months when he's playing full NBA basketball. I wanted to jump straight into my Miami Heat because it's more so I'm starting to hear it's first it was taking the piss out of us, but now it's getting borderline disrespectful. I think people have ruled. I've seen the people saying we're not even going to make the play-in. Bucks, Celtics have jumped way ahead of us, and I think I need to stand up for my Miami Heat. My first take, I guess if you want to call it that, I think Pat Riley has one more trick up his sleeve. Now, obviously, this has been a very disappointing summer. We let Gabe Vincent walk, Matt Strus. We thought Damian Lillard's coming, and I think most NBA fans thought that Damian Lillard was coming to us. I mean, the allure of South Beach, Pat Riley playing with and obviously he quite literally said, "I want to go to the Miami Heat." So when that didn't happen, I was bamboozled. But I think we are too shrewd of a franchise to be, I guess, ruled out the way that some way I've been seeing some NBA talks. Obviously, the star power, the way that Damian Lillard being with Giannis, who is the perfect matchup, I think, one of the best matchups in the NBA history, I think. But in terms of what we can offer somebody, and disgruntled stars are literally everywhere in the league. Donovan Mitchell is what Heat Twitter is circling around. Obviously, the Knicks is what he's been linked to. But I think there are players out there, the Zion Williamses of the world. I think a franchise may mishandle their star player, and Pat Riley will swoop in at the end of the day. I just refuse to believe that we won't put up a fighting chance. And I can guarantee you those Bucks and Celtics fans that are ripping into us on Twitter, they would hate to play us. So us having one more move, one more disgruntled star playing for us, is it completely out of the realm of possibility that we are not back in the NBA Finals based off Pat Riley's brilliance and what Miami Heat can do? Do you see that as an outsider?
So if your statement is, Pat Riley has one more trick up his sleeve, that is real. I get that. You've got the Lowry and Hero contracts, and Hero himself has got some worth. Lowry's more has to be a throw-in at this point with other assets. True. Jovic and Hackers Jr. are nice young players. Like, they're worth something. You got a couple of picks, like whatever. So there is something probably brewing up his sleeve. I'm just wondering who it is in terms of which player may become available that lessens the gap now that I think is there between Milwaukee, Boston, and not just Miami, but every other team in the East. And I'm not sure what player Miami could acquire that lessens that gap. Now, maybe everyone agrees there is a gap throughout the regular season, and Miami make a move regardless, and they spring a couple upsets in the playoffs they beat Milwaukee again, or they beat Boston again, like that kind of thing. But I think there is a wide gulf between those two teams and the rest of the East, and I just don't see the trick up Pat Riley's sleeve that would allow Miami to get back into the conversation for me, because the Bucks getting Dame, the Celtics getting Porzingis and Holiday, it's going to be super tough for any other team to come close to those. Like, I just think there's such a huge gap now. Does Donovan Mitchell do it for me? Like, if you throw Donovan Mitchell on the Miami Heat, no, I don't think so. I mean, him, Bam, and Jimmy is a nice trio. Your depth has kind of gone by the wayside this offseason with losing Vincent Strus. Zion, you're talking about, yeah, maybe him, but yeah, I don't see it. Yeah, I don't know. Like, who's the player for you that you think would lessen the gap between your Miami Heat and then the Celtics and the Bucks?
The two players that I want to, maybe because I know they're disgruntled or they're going to be a watch this season. Donovan Mitchell, Karl-Anthony Towns are the two players that I have in mind that if we got one of those, I haven't even looked at what the package would be in the contract.
The Towns and Bam together?
I think with Cat's shooting and Bam's ability to switch on so many people, I think that is a real front court. But I see the Heat as Butler, Bam, and Spo. And in terms of an off season, I think he'd be one of the coaches you'd hate to go up against. So what he did with the new scrubs, it was quite extraordinary. So again, I'd have to look at trade packages and everything like that. But I just think more so that people have been completely ruling Miami out as being now especially when that Drew Holiday, Dame Dollar contract trades went through, and I thought, all right, relax, guys. There's a fair chance. We've proved ourselves against these two teams. So maybe this is just me standing up for my team, but I just wanted to put it out there. Don't rule us out completely just yet.
No, that's fair enough. And I think the coaching point you make is an important one, because I might say the playing talent between the Bucks, the Celtics, and then the Heat and everyone else in the East is quite a wide gap. But you can equally say that the coaching ability from Spo to Joe Mazzulla and Adrian Griffin, that's a wide gap as well.
It's a wide gap as well, exactly.
And so maybe you're right that in a 7-game series, when tactically things come into it a lot more, that's a major positive for the Heat over the two rivals that we see at the top of the Eastern Conference. So it's a good point. Let me talk about the Dame thing, because I had this further down my list, but I thought I'd bring it up given we just mentioned the Heat and their inability to acquire Dame, and he ends up going to Milwaukee. So Damian Lillard in the preseason shot 31.4% from the field and 19% from three-point range. My question to you is, will he take time to adjust to being the second best player on a team? And what I mean by that is, I think he might average less than 25 points and shoot less than 40% from the field through the first 20 regular season games. Is that real, or is that an overreaction?
That's 100% real, and I think the first 20 games, Twitter discourse is always so funny to watch and see the people saying, no, we need to trade him now. And I'm like, come on, guys. They've been here for a couple of weeks. What are you talking about there? Now, I did watch their debut, I guess, Freak Time. Is that the thing that we're going to go with against the Lakers? And yeah, I think then Giannis at the end of the game is like, I've never been this open in my life, which is quite scary for the rest of the NBA. The stat that they pulled up there, 1.16 points per possession last season is what Lillard had for pick and rolls, and his pick and roll partners were nothing even remotely close to Giannis. So this year, what they could transform into, I mean, their pick and roll, it's either Lillard open three or you drop it to Giannis. And in terms of downhill basketball, there's probably not much better. I absolutely think that's real, and I think they will take a lot of adjustments. I don't have the Bucks winning the chip this year. I think to make that big of an adjustment in such a short amount of time will take a lot of time. I have them as the number one seed comfortably in the East. I think regular season, I mean, Lillard's been one of even if he's starting to get up there in age, he's still one of the best regular season performers, and Giannis He's top 2 player in the league. I'm I'm jumping back and forth on the defensive front of them because they've got the front court on there, but there's a lot of athleticism and in across the whole NBA. So there's going to be something I'm jumping back and forth with. But in terms of adjustment, if what Lillard can do with the most basic of big men already, and with his shooting ability, and I think Giannis is being as great as he is, I think the adjustment will probably be max 20 games, and they'll be able to figure it out from there. So is there anything particular that made you say that this will take adjustment, or it's just a new player going to a new team? It's something he's never done before, full stop, this late in his career.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that factor, and then the factor that the preseason stuff, 31.4% from the floor and 19% from 3-point range. Like, that's appalling. I didn't watch all of Dame's playing time, that's for sure, but I did see Klay Thompson throughout the preseason, and he shot similarly from the floor, and it was ugly. So I can only imagine that the Dame stuff was ugly. And again, you can throw it away as, oh, it's preseason basketball, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm someone that buys into preseason basketball a little bit more than what most do. And so, yeah, I do think there's going to be an adjustment period, and I'd be surprised if he's averaging more than 25 points per game at the 20-game mark. Just on the Bucks and your kind of concerns, I was just looking it up here because defensively, like you look at their lineup last season where they had, obviously they had Drew and they had Giannis and Lopez in the front court. Like with those three players, you would think, elite defensive team. They were, what were they last season defensively?
I can tell you they weren't impressive in the postseason when Jimmy Butler was going back-to-back 40-point games with 3 all defensive players on the other team. So.
Yeah, and there were some question marks there, and with so they were defensive rating of 119 in that series against the Heat.
Yeah,
and that Heat team was like in the regular season. What were they like offensively? I'm just checking on the fly here now. They were 25th.
Yeah,
25th in offensive rating, and they pulled apart the Milwaukee defense in that first round series. Now, yes, Giannis had some injury troubles, whatever, but there's some slight concerns with them, particularly defensively now with Holiday going out and Dame coming in.
Yeah, well, I think you and I both criticised Budenholzer wanted this team defense as opposed to just throwing like one-on-one defenders out there. He wouldn't let Giannis guard Butler, and he kept doing this zone thing. So AJ Griffin, he's got a tall task ahead of him. I guess I touched on Karl Towns before. Maybe this is wishful thinking that he comes to the Heat, but this to me is Karl Towns' the biggest year of his career. I remember when he came into the league, he was putting up like 20 and 10 comfortably, and I remember all the surveys like this is the greatest prospect we've ever seen, and his career has just gone up and down. I think he's really corny as a player. I'm really worried about him being the guy on a team. Obviously, the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards has been a revelation for them, and I've seen some people putting them top 4. I've seen some people massive slide. The Rudy Gobert experiment is going up there. So I think this season's big for many reasons. First of all, the Rudy Gobert contract and just that Twin Tower thing. We only got 20 also games last year from them, so I feel like this year we'll actually get to see that, and that better work because that's a huge investment. Anthony Edwards' contract extension kicks in, so their cap room is starting to fill up, and Rudy Gobert's on a fair wicket there, and you also don't want to ruin this Anthony Edwards development because he, to me, has top 5 player, if not best player in the league, type potential to me. So I've got this is his last chance to prove it because there was times I've seen Karl-Anthony Towns. I'm like, this guy could be. This is a Hall of Fame talent with what he can do. Then the games and playoff series, I'm like, do you not realise how good you can possibly be? So to me, if he doesn't have a career year this year, the trade talks begin straight away. The Knicks, I know, will be coming. I'm hoping my Heat throw that I had in the ring there. And to me, this is his chance to prove that if he's not just a guy that wouldn't maximise his talent and actually be someone. So, in terms of what you need to see from what you think of Karl Towns this year, and do you agree that this is the biggest year of his career to prove himself as a future Hall of Fame, maybe, or just I'd call him a bust if he didn't reach his talent.
Bust.
For not reaching his potential talent. Yeah.
Oh my! I mean, that's an overreaction. That is an incredible. Like he's a multi-time All-Star, averages over 20 points in his sleep. Like, don't call him a bust. That's a major overreaction. I get you want him on the Miami Heat, but geez, you start this conversation early. No, it depends what you mean by prove yourself, because if you're saying, oh, he's, one of the greatest offensive talents we've seen over the past 15, 20 years, and if you think he should be the best player on a championship team like you'd hope to expect out of a number one overall pick, I don't think he's going to get the chance to actually develop into that, because you've actually got another number one overall pick there in Anthony Edwards, who to me is just clearly the number one dog on that Timberwolves team now.
Right.
And so if you're Karl-Anthony Towns, as much as you might want to prove yourself as capable of being the best player on a championship team or whatever, you actually don't need to be anymore. Like, for so many years, he carried that mantle as, if the Timberwolves want to be good, if they want to be a consistent playoff team, if they want to get deep into the postseason, then Cat has to be the man. He actually doesn't have to be the man anymore. He can be the second best player on a championship team. Now, where I think the conversation will start arising is if you've got a team with Anthony Edwards, who we think can ascend into a top 10 player in the league, let's say. If you've got Karl-Anthony Towns, who self-proclaims himself as the best big man shooter ever and a great offensive talent. If you've got a 3-time defensive player of the year in Rudy Gobert, a savvy veteran point guard in Mike Conley, and some pretty good depth pieces as well around that. Like, I'm a big Kyle Anderson fan. I think he could play well on any team. If you've got like those pieces in place and you're still in the play-in tournament, that's crap. That is genuinely crap. And so at that point, you would have to start changing things up. If we get to like the February trade deadline and the Timberwolves are between 7th and 10th or 7th or below in the conference, or there's, a significant gap between them and the 4th team in the conference, that's a concern for me, because I think this team, and I think Minnesota fans should be looking at this team and thinking the West is wide open enough that we are capable of being at least a top 4 team in the Western Conference. And I think we just look at this as opposition fans and think it's the Minnesota Timberwolves. And they can't get their shit together ever. And that is why we don't expect it to happen. Like, few people would have the Timberwolves as a top 4 seed. But if I was a Timberwolves fan, that's what I'd be expecting.
I think Karl-Anthony Towns is so symbolic, almost symbolic of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Loaded with talent, could be doing so much better. And you're right, this West is obviously. I just checked now. He's about to go into year 9 of his career. I don't know why he's not a top 10 NBA player, Karl-Anthony Towns. With the level of talent that he has and how much he talks about how good he is and what he thinks he is, I see why. I don't understand why he's not a top 10 player. And to me, this is the biggest year of his career. And I'm going to be watching and coming back to this take a lot throughout the whole season.
Perhaps the biggest storyline in the NBA at the moment is James Harden and the Philadelphia 76ers. So my question to you is, if they, as in the 76ers, don't address this James Harden situation soon, they risk finishing below 5th in the Eastern Conference. Real or overreaction?
I think that's absolutely real. I think, just use the term Karl-Anthony Towns, Philadelphia, for the decade they've had of drama, I guess this year is going to be crazy. Because let's say you mishandle the James Harden situation, and maybe let's say you gamble on Tyrese Maxey and you think he's the guy that's going to be, I guess, Joel Embiid's. I think the Joel Embiid issue in this is bigger than people should realise. Because if you look at Joel Embiid, and there's murmurs of just teams planning stories about him as potentially a trade candidate, essentially. On there, if you're a franchise and somebody of his talent and he's been an MVP and one of the best players of the league and stuff, even if you lost him, you'd be pretty confident that you'd get a pretty huge haul back for Joel Embiid. So if it doesn't work out, it sucks obviously losing somebody that good, but at least the haul, we could get a whole bunch of draft picks or stars on there. I would love to see how many teams would comfortably trade for Joel Embiid now, because obviously they'd ask for a king's ransom. If you're Daryl Morey, you'd say, I've seen how hard he drives a bike, and you'd ask for everything, essentially. I don't know how many teams would be willing to fork out their entire future and their stars for, I mean, Embiid, if you were to guess, how many more years of Embiid do you reckon we've got?
As in prime level, like 30 point per game scorer Embiid.
Mm-hmm.
maybe 3 or 4. Like, what is he, 30?
He's 30
I'm
this
not
year.
sure he's aging overly well given his
No,
injury
and
history.
yeah, big men and like small guards over 30, especially with his injury history. And I think Philly are quite actually screwed on so many fronts because obviously if Harden doesn't work out, and you then turn your attention to Embiid. Let's say he's angry and he demands a trade or everything. I don't think you're going to get the haul back that what the Lakers got for AD. That was one of the biggest hauls I think I've ever seen. I don't think
Pelicans.
teams would be comfortable to give away something like that for 2-3 years of Joel Embiid at this stage on there. And I think that could be spell trouble for a lot of them. I'm not saying Tyrese Maxey to me is the only kind of exciting person. I mean, Kelly Oubre is the only signing they made over the offseason.
My man.
On there. Kelly Oubre. So I think 50 is almost generous. I think it'll be even worse if they don't solve that situation. And unfortunately, they're going to have to start getting desperate for fear of Embiid the Embiid situation getting worse and worse. So I think you've been a little bit generous with the fifth. I could reckon it could be even worse because if he starts getting angry, if he starts arcing up, it's very on brand with Philadelphia for this to happen. But obviously you agree with that, and you think Tyrese Maxey. Let's just go say you decide to do the route of Tyrese Maxey as a second guy, how far do you reckon Philly could go with that as a second guy?
I don't know. I suppose the saving grace here for Philly is that next offseason they're going to have a heap of cap room. I mean, I guess Maxey's the one, like they've got to try and re-sign him, but Harden will come off the books. If they get an expiring for him, then that comes off the books, whatever. Tobias Harris is probably the big one as well, who's making $35 million or whatever else, and he'll come off the books. So there's some salary cap flexibility for them moving forward. Tyrese, yeah, I genuinely think an Embiid Maxey combo as your top two probably gets you anywhere between 4th and 7th, maybe in the conference.
Yeah.
I don't know, and that's why there are my kind of overarching point here for that statement was the fact there's so many teams in the East to me that are on the precipice of making a leap, and now some of them will and some of them won't. So the 76ers finished third, obviously in the East last season behind the Bucks and the Celtics, who I think everyone has as the consensus top two still. So if you look behind the 76ers, you've got the Cavs and the Knicks, and then other teams to me as well that could make a leap. The Hawks, the Raptors, who I want to ask you about in a second, the Pacers, and the Magic. So are you if you're telling me that like two of the Cavs, the Knicks, the Hawks, the Raptors, the Pacers, and the Magic can overtake a Philly team that's without Harden or without any assets that they get in return for him, if you're telling me two of those teams can leapfrog Philly, I would believe you.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I believe in kind of the talent on the Cavs and the Knicks, and I believe in the talent on the other teams and the potential rise they could make as well. So if that were to eventuate, if all of a sudden Philly are the 6th team in the Eastern Conference and they bow out in the first round of the playoffs or something, then like Embiid trade request has to be coming, doesn't it? Like it would just have to at that point. And
Absolutely.
So that's the balancing point I suppose Daryl Morey is making right now is that I don't want to give Harden away for nothing. Ideally, I'd do what I did with Simmons, where I was everyone wanted you to trade Simmons, and he held on and he held on and he eventually got an upgrade in Harden. But you've also got to balance that with the fact that hey, we've got to appease Joel at some point, and being third in the East and making the second round of the playoffs, that's not necessarily appeasing him. So imagine what would happen if all of a sudden we're 6th or 7th, battling just to avoid the play-in tournament, and then get kicked out in the first round. Like, to me, that would just be a dead set path straight to a trade request. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Shark's going to come circling. I think the Knicks end game, if Donovan Mitchell doesn't end up working out, Embiid to me is their end game with their assets. So, Daryl better know what he's doing in this Harden situation because Harden leads to Embiid. They're tied together. Regardless, in terms of other teams that I have that are I guess walking on a tightrope, The LA Lakers, I've watched, I guess me being LeBron being my man, the 12 months they've had trade-wise have been, the Russ contract had to go. That was every man who's talking about that. But what they turned that around to, saw the depth, Austin Reeves and Rui and even D'Lo just looking like different players already, which is super exciting. But at the end of the day, it comes down to LeBron James and Anthony Davis and their availability. Preseason, they've looked good, healthy, but we'll see. But again, they rarely ever finish seasons since they've been at the Lakers. LeBron James, I mean, I can't believe another season of LeBron James having to be the biggest reason if a team, depending on how far they go. Davis should have taken over by now, but Davis is about to hit 32, which is kind of crazy. And they're both injured. You can comfortably say they're both injury prone. Now, they're young players. As much as they talk about, their big seasons ahead of them, we don't know anything about Rui. We don't know anything about D'Lo in a deep playoff run with championship expectations. 82 games is a long, long, long season. So, to me, I've written down biggest boom or bust teams because I've either got them like probably making the finals or just crashing and burning and having to get rid of everyone because you've got LeBron. All you need is a 15-game LeBron James injury, and I think they slide pretty comfortably because they are day and night. So there's tight ropes that all teams are walking. Obviously, Philly we just talked about with the Darryl situation and everything, but the Lakers. I'm talking about just stark difference in terms of a good and bad. I have the Lakers, I think, on there. Do you see any other team? Do you agree with the Lakers? Or what concerns do you have about the Lakers, if not health?
I can't believe this. I legitimately cannot believe this. You are kind of being slightly pessimistic about the Lakers, and I'm going to be the optimistic one. I think they'll be good, and I actually think they've got a pretty good floor. Like I don't see them being anything below 6th or 7th this season, and they could be as high as 1st or 2nd. So there is a margin there. There's no doubt about that. But I think there's other teams, particularly in the West. If I look at a Thunder, for example, now I don't think the Thunder, there's any way that they can bust as such, even if they finish 10th again, kind of thing. But like to me, they could finish 10th, 11th, or they could finish kind of top 3. Like there is a big contrast in what the Thunder could do this season, in my opinion. I think the Lakers is probably I think Denver are the top team in the West, so you could have the Lakers second. You could have them anywhere, I think, between that. And I think the worst they'll be is like 6th or 7th. I think they've genuinely got a good floor. I think they could actually manage LeBron absences. It's probably the Davis stuff which worries me. Like no one's replacing LeBron's value, but you can give the ball to Austin Reeves a little bit more. And look, I'm not liking Austin Reeves as a player. Some of his foul baiting stuff is absolutely ridiculous. And I genuinely hate it. But he's a good player, and they got him on a ridiculously good contract. And you can give him the ball, and he can make plays for you. Gabe Vincent is a solid role player who has got deep playoff experience now that we saw with the Heat last season. Hachimura, like you can believe in his 3-point shooting or not from last season's playoffs, but he can be a bucket getter. If LeBron's out, like you give the ball to Davis a little bit more in the post and let him go to work, like whatever else. I think they can actually cover his absence a bit better than what like we've seen in previous seasons. I actually think Davis, whenever he inevitably goes down for 10 games, I think they're going to have more issues replacing him than they will LeBron, because if you're taking Davis out, all of a sudden you're asking a lot from Christian Wood and Jackson Hayes.
Yeah,
which is
that
not
drop off scares me massively.
There's a stark drop off, as you say there. In contrast from going from I'm not trying to say Rui Hachimura is anywhere close to LeBron, but at least Rui Hachimura is an average to above average competent NBA player, which Christian Wood and Jackson Hayes might not necessarily be. So I think the Davis health is probably more important to me than from a Lakers perspective than the LeBron health. I just think they're deep. I think they've done a fantastic job with this roster, and I just their floor to me is pretty high. I think there's enough talent there that even with the odd injury to LeBron and AD, I still think like I'd be shocked, legitimately shocked, if they are. I'd be shocked if they're in the playing tournament at all. Like I'm just locking them in as a top 6 seed for sure, even accounting for some injuries. And I'd be shocked if they're anything, even further shocked if they're anything below 8th, let's say. So, yeah, I don't see them missing the playoffs. Anything more to add on that?
Well, maybe it's just PTSD from mine, but every LeBron team I've ever watched, I thought on paper this looks like it'll work, and then the ones I'm most confident about, I'm like, oh, you guys suck without LeBron. So,
Yeah,
maybe
but
it's
we've
just
just gone.
PTSD.
I mean, we've just gone through the Westbrook period, right? Like,
Oh God.
this is you just remind yourself, like this is not the Westbrook Lakers where they loaded up on Westbrook and had no other depth pieces whatsoever, and then when the Westbrook thing didn't work, everyone's turning like, what do we do now, kind of thing. They actually pivoted really well from that. And D'Angelo Russell isn't like I don't like D'Angelo Russell.
Either.
It's a good contract though. I think I think it'll be a tradable contract. They could move him if it doesn't work. I have question marks on him come playoff time. There's little doubt about that. But he's been pretty good in the preseason, and I think he's just like a handy regular season player. Where, again, he's a competent, above average to me NBA player. Like he can get you, like if LeBron's out, you give the ball to D'Angelo Russell a little bit more, and he could get you 20 plus points on any given night. So there's safety nets there if LeBron is out. Again, Davis, I'm not so sure. Anyway, we'll move on from the Lakers. After an unbeaten preseason, the Toronto Raptors are a lock to make the Eastern Conference playoffs. They finish, 10th last season, I think. Is that real or overreaction?
I'm going to go overreaction, even if I've got my man Scotty Barnes on that list. It's
The next
more
Giannis.
so the next Giannis, according to me. It's my confusion alone these past couple of years post-title, because I applauded their roster building ability and their internal development. Pascal Siakam turning into an all-star out of nowhere, Fred VanVleet. I just thought this team is poised, and their front office seemed to pull off the Kawhi trade and build the roster in such a short amount of time. I got excited for their future. I thought the Raptors could actually going to be like a powerhouse in the NBA. But the decisions they've made, I heard them in the talks for KD when he was at the Nets and he was a trade option. I even saw Damian Lillard trade. I don't know if that was just Toronto Twitter making it across my feed, but suddenly they're in the racing for him. They got offered multiple first-round picks for OG, and then they said no to that. To kind of, I guess, pull out of trades or not be able to go through with anything, to lose Fred VanVleet, but then to double down. Their center, I can't believe I've forgotten his name.
Jakob Poeltl.
Poeltl, yeah, to trade for him and then sign for the contract as they did. It looks like they're doubling down on this team, but they still haven't signed Pascal to a contract extension. He's a free agent end of next year. Obviously, they're huge on Scotty Barnes, and they're going to trade KD or Lillard or anyone for him. So they're doubling down on their youth, I guess, but they're not pulling the trigger on any trades. They're not going to extend Pascal Siakam on there. So to me, I don't know what they're trying to do, in terms of roster building. If you don't want to pull the trigger or anything, OG, I feel like you could have traded him. I feel like his trade value was way high, and you could have traded for him, but you didn't pull the trigger on that. I'm so confident heaps of teams will offer things. So to me, them not having a clear plan, like when they fired Nick Nurse, I thought, okay, maybe they're going to go fully youth, clean slate, everything on there. But then that hasn't really eventuated into anything. So to me, for them not being 100% clear with what it is they're trying to do at the moment, is kind of making me question about it. Because I think the other teams in the East, I'm way more confident with. Like I can see they're trying to win. Like teams like Cleveland have to win to keep Donovan Mitchell happy and stuff like that. But to me, the Raptors, I don't know, just treading water in a way that's just not filling me with a lot of confidence. So I'm going to be pessimistic on the Raptors until I can see a clear path on there. So, your confidence, you saw that obviously preseason, but what you just saw some things there that made you confident that they're going to be a different Toronto this year?
Different as in slightly better, yes, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not going to go as far as saying they're an absolute lock for the Eastern Conference playoffs because I still think they'll be at the bottom end. But I do like if you ask me, will they make the playoffs or not? I think I'd say they will. You can be concerned with the direction of the franchise and the lack of aggression, I suppose, in terms of maybe trying to trade for a star player or trying to trade some of your pieces like Anunoby or Siakam or whatever else. Like in terms of the direction, I suppose they're just waiting and hoping that Scotty Barnes all of a sudden takes a major leap to the point where he's a guaranteed all-star top 15 player in the league. And then with him as your best player, maybe you can be a top 4 or 5 seed in the East. So maybe they're just kind of waiting that out and retaining their key assets around him for that point to hopefully materialize. But I mean, defensively, there should be a top 5 defense. I mean, if you're a top 5 defense, then I mean you shouldn't be missing the playoffs. So they've got Barnes, Anunoby, Siakam, Pirtle, like as 4 or 5 starters. If you get any kind of like availability and health run out of those guys where, you know, they're all playing 65 plus games, then that's when I would lock them in for the playoffs. Like I think in that scenario, they would definitely make the playoffs. There's injury concerns around Anunoby and maybe Siakam to an extent. But defensively, I mean, their defensive rating over the preseason was 92.5, which in modern basketball is absolutely ridiculous. Now, I don't think it'll stay at that point, but even if they regress to the mean slightly, I still think they can be a top 5 defense in basketball. And if that's the case, they should make the playoffs. Like, there was nothing about their preseason offensively that, like, they didn't just have a 5-game stretch where they shot the ball ridiculously well that, you know, again, that will regress to the mean. Like, that didn't happen. They were 21st in 3-point attempts during the preseason and 15th in 3-point percentage, which is probably where they'll be at. Like, maybe they regress even a little bit more in terms of the percentage. But, like, there wasn't anything wild in terms of the offense that you would easily state, oh, well, that's not happening in the regular season. And although the 92.5 defensive rating won't maintain in the regular season, I think a top 5 defense could maintain. So you can be concerned about the direction in their future and that they're kind of wandering aimlessly at the moment. But I think at the same time, you could also say, oh, yeah, they'll be a 7-8 seed. Like they'll be a average to slightly above average team. So I think they're okay this season. Again, the direction, questionable.
Yeah, well, I guess doubling down, Scotty Barnes, you've said no to KD and Lillard, supposedly, so you must be pretty confident. But I'm just looking at, so Darko's their new coach on there. I'm just looking at his past few years. He's just come from Memphis, Phoenix, and then OKC. And you just think about those periods for those teams and their young talent, how quickly they developed on there. So, and we both know a new coach can swing a franchise in a short amount of time. So here's to hoping, especially for me, it said some outlandish things about Scotty Barnes. Speaking of Ben Simmons, who's been a staple of this podcast series for a long time, preseason, wow, I think I'm going to overreact. Ben Simmons looks like the Ben Simmons of old, in terms of aggression too, not just obviously we knew the talent was always there, but there was this when he was at Philly and obviously in his All-Star form, he had this how he was driving at the rim with such aggression and such excitement. That was completely gone last year. He looked so passive, and if he wasn't driving to the cup, he literally can't do anything else. I've wrote he could be the biggest X factor, if not one of the biggest X factors in the league, because let's say a fully healthy Ben Simmons and also like coming across like mentality wise, actually aggressive, driving to the cup on there. Mikal Bridges, his usage went up and also his shooting percentages like improved as well. And very rarely does that happen for somebody to actually go up. So Mikal Bridges, as a number one, is probably a lot to ask of him. But in that short amount of time that he was the number one in Brooklyn, he improved dramatically. Cam Johnson, we know, with his shooting ability. And also the Nets, when it was like the D-Lo Nets, how fun they were as a team, as a young players. Their development must have been incredible. Their coaching on there. I think if Ben Simmons could be back and Claxton turned into a defensive guy last year, and we know Mikal Bridges can defend anyone, and Ben Simmons has been up there in Defensive Player of the Year talks for a long time. They could be a team. They're not going to win a chip, but in terms of if you put a healthy Ben Simmons of Mikal Bridges and as comfortable as he is, they could be one of the biggest X factors in the East. And maybe not beat the Celtics or Bucks, but at least make it tough for them because they've got the wings and bodies to throw at somebody. So Ben Simmons could be the biggest X factor in the league. Is that real or an overreaction?
I think it's an overreaction, but I get what you're saying, and I don't think it's an absurd statement because if Ben Simmons is all of a sudden good again, then that makes quite a difference to how we view Brooklyn, right? Because right now, I don't view them very highly. I don't think they'll make the playoffs. I'd be like, there's a genuine chance they don't make the play-in tournament. They might be one of the bottom 5 teams in the East for me. And so if Ben Simmons is good again, and I'll play devil's advocate for a bit here. When you say he's back, I mean, he's not. We're not going to be seeing Ben Simmons make an All-Star team this season. Like when you say he's back, and when we say he's returning to what he once was, like it's somewhere in between All-Star Ben Simmons and what we've seen in the past 2 seasons, which has been a player that's completely physically and mentally shot, right? So, just to play devil's advocate, like he averaged 6.5 points in the preseason. Like, let's not like say, some world beater that was averaging 20. Like he averaged 6.5 points. Now, that was in 22 minutes per game. So even if you want to extrapolate that out to 30 minutes, okay, he's averaging 8 or 9 points. Cool. Now, he did average 5.3 rebounds, 7 assists. Maybe he's a constant triple-double threat. Yep, fair. I don't think he's an all-star. I don't think he's anywhere close to being an all-star. So, no, I don't think he's the biggest X factor in the league because I think there are guys who could completely jump out of the ground and be all-star caliber players. I don't think that's going to be Ben Simmons. And so, yeah, you got a point? Go on.
I've got to retort. I've got to return, Sam. Okay. In a vacuum, Ben Simmons maybe like this season probably not going to swing all that much, and to get back to the level he was at, I'd have to see to believe it. But I'm thinking long term because I know the Nets were in the talks for Dame Lillard, and I know I'm definitely confident with Donovan Mitchell was unhappy on there. But let's say Simmons. Let's really use our imaginations here. Simmons goes back to that form. Mikal Bridges maintains his. Cam Johnson stays good. Claxton keeps improving. That same fun Nets vibe that we had from way back when is there. If you're a disgruntled star, Brooklyn as a franchise, I can imagine they'd have the money on there. If you've got Ben Simmons and Mikal Bridges as complementary pieces on there, I mean,
I know where you're coming from. It would be an attractive destination.
Attractive destination, yeah, with those guys who don't need the ball, who've got very complementary styles, and if you've got a defensive player of the year, you wouldn't really have to play much defense. Those guys are already there. I mean, I just think if he can, I'd have to believe it to see it that Ben Simmons is back. But I don't know, Brooklyn would be very attractive if I was a disgruntled guy.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I watched a little bit of Ben in preseason. He does look, I think, most importantly, and he spoke about it, like he looks athletically and physically a lot better than what he was. And I do think that sometimes we just put the struggles, I suppose, of the last couple of seasons into the mental basket, and he's just completely lost his confidence and stuff. But I think a lot of that did emanate from physically and the kind of the back issues that he's had. He's had surgery on it as well. So I think it's important that we don't dismiss the physical aspect of what he's been through in the past couple of seasons, and hopefully he's coming back and he looks back to his kind of physical, athletic self. You said he doesn't need the ball in his hands. That's going to be the biggest thing for me with this Nets team, because there is a distinct lack of shooting on this roster. And for as good as Ben looked at times throughout the preseason, he still wasn't making 3-point jumpers or attempting 3-point jumpers. So there's still that element. And if you're going to have the ball in Bridges' hands a little bit, in Dinwiddie's hands a little bit, and you're still wanting to play Ben for 30 plus minutes a game, then he's going to have to be really good in terms of moving off ball and cutting to the basket, which I did see on a couple of occasions, to be fair. So maybe there's some room for optimism there. But yeah, there's going to be when him and Claxton are on the floor together and you've got two absolute complete non-shooting threats. I do have some worries with that, and that puts kind of a lot of pressure on, like, is Bridges going to maintain as like a 40% three-point shooter? Question marks. Dinwiddie is a streaky shooter, I think. Cam Johnson is a good shooter, but like you're putting a lot of pressure on him to make his three. Like he's going to have to be a guaranteed 40% from three. And then some of your other guys like Finney Smith, O'Neal, these other wings who, like, their value is really as a 3 and D, so they need to be shooting close to 40% from three or high 30s. But Brooklyn are going to be an interesting team to watch. I have no doubt about that. Again, I think they might be one of the bottom 5 teams in the East, but we'll wait and see what happens. Talking of X factors, here's one of the biggest ones for me, and I wanted to bring a Warrior flavor to this. After averaging the second most points in the league over the preseason, Jonathan Kuminga is about to prove himself as a top 3 or 4 player on the Warriors over the next 6 months. Real or overreaction?
I truthfully haven't watched it. I think Kuminga full game. I only seen clips and highlights there. Definitely been in the gym. I can give you that much on there. I don't see him overtaking Wiggins' spot. To me, Wiggins just has because that's what it would be. He would take Wiggins' spot in that starting lineup and play that Wiggins role.
Look, there's a few different things. Like, I suppose they could do. I think at times you might see like their best 5 might actually be Steph, either Clay or Chris Paul. Now, you would predominantly say Clay, but his form and his shooting throughout preseason has been a major concern. One of those two. Wiggins, and then you might have Kuminga and Green as your front court. And so you might end up with Looney on the bench and one of CP3 or Clay. Because obviously once you have both of those guys starting, or you're in your closing lineup, let's say, and you have Wiggins at the 4 and Draymond at the 5, I mean, it's an incredibly small team, and I think every Warrior fan has some question marks on whether that is going to be an effective lineup given the lack of size.
Yeah, probably not within the next 6 months, because if I ever associate, especially winning top players at the Warriors, it's like, to be honest, Looney was one of your top players last year, and purely because he knows his role and he knows. And to me, I think his IQ he doesn't get enough to talk. His defensive IQ. Sabonis was an all NBA player and had one of the best seasons, and he got mauled by Kevin Looney. So, I mean, Kuminga doesn't. At least I haven't seen that level of Warriors.
IQ, yeah.
At this stage, I think he's a talent, and it's good to see him developing. But to me, the Warriors, when I think winning basketball or top players of the Warriors, so watching the Warriors all those years dismantle LeBron James, it's high IQ playmaking as well. A lot of great high level playmaking, and Kuminga is a talent, but yeah, probably I wouldn't say any of those. Do you So obviously you believe that he can be a top player. He can be your top 4 player.
Okay, so this is why I think he can be. One, because I think he's talented enough, which is the first thing. And the second thing is, I think the Warriors and Steve Kerr need to realize that if they want to be a championship contending team, Jonathan Kuminga is going to have to be probably a top 3 player on the team. And what I mean by that is, you've got a team here who I think, as presently constructed, I think their ceiling might be the Western Conference Finals. I would be surprised if this team, like what we see right now, is capable of winning the championship. I think there's too many question marks in terms of the lack of size and the kind of defense and rebounding that is associated with that. However, if you're the Warriors and you're thinking, okay, our ceiling right now is the Western Conference Finals, how do we get to being a championship team? You either go out and you make a trade, or you look at internal development and who can take a major step here and take us from being, at best, Western Conference Finals team to a championship. And at 35, I don't think Steph's going to be drastically better than what he has been in the past. At 38, I don't think Chris Paul's going to be drastically better than what he's been in the past, albeit he's coming to a new team, so he's obviously going to add something to the Warriors. At 33, I don't think Clay and Draymond are going to be drastically better than what they've been in the past. I don't think Looney is going to be drastically better than what we've been in the past. I'd be surprised if Wiggins is ever better than what we saw in the 2022 championship run. And so outside of making another major trade, to me, their only avenue to being a genuine championship team is if Kuminga is all of a sudden going from their 7th best player to their 3rd best player. And he's all of a sudden a guy that is playing 25 plus minutes in the NBA finals and he's getting you 15 points, 6 rebounds and 3 assists or something like that. And providing you with athletic two-way play. So I genuinely think if they don't want to make a big trade, I genuinely think in order to be a championship team, I think that has to happen. And I think they need to at least explore the opportunity. If he, because you got to give him that opportunity. I think, and his preseason has shown you. I think you've got to give him that opportunity. You've got to give him 25 plus minutes a game, which I think will happen. And if he stands up to it, and he's got the talent to become a top 3 player on the team, and then maybe you're absolute top 3 championship contender. And if he doesn't, maybe he's off the team in 6 months. And this is why I think when you ask biggest X factors in the league, to me, Jonathan Kuminga is up there because he's a guy who could be a top 3 player on the team in 6 months, or he could be off the team completely. He's one of the biggest X factors in the league.
Is this a contract for him?
No, he's extension eligible off his rookie contract next year. So this is a big year for him because he is eligible for a contract next off season, but he does have another year on his rookie contract to come because he's coming into his 3rd year. But it is a big year for him, obviously, because he could be pushing for a contract in excess of. I mean, based on preseason, you'd probably give him $80 million. But I mean, again, he's someone who legitimately could be anywhere based on this year's what he does this season. He could be anywhere between a $10 million guy and a $30 million guy. And again, this is why I'm saying he's one of the biggest X factors in the league.
The higher stakes are better for me. So better for NBA fans. So he'll be a watch. My last one was more just observation across the league, because obviously tanking has been the biggest thorn in, I think, everybody's side this year. When you're watching teams just blatantly lose on Sam Ferg, a good mate of mine, and he's a Philly fan, and to watching him go through what he did all those years ago was quite frightening. But obviously the league's not good for them. They're coming up to TV deals, and if their players aren't playing, they'll won't be able to get the money, and so they've thrown in the award thresholds, I guess, to be eligible for them, and then they've thrown in the in-season cup. I just looked at the teams, and I guess I'm trying to make out what everyone's intention was this season. And I think I can't look at a team and say they're going to blatantly tank this year. They've got no hope of everything. If I could probably look at the teams that are going to be, because obviously there's going to be teams at the bottom, that's just a given. But to me, it's just going to be because they're just not as talented as other teams. The 3 worst teams to me will be the Wizards, Detroit, and Charlotte, all in the East. And to me, it's just because they just don't have the talent to contend with other teams. But they, if you look at the Wizards, who've moved on from a god-awful Brad Beal contract, and now I think the Jordan Poole, he's scoring 41 the other day, I think, and then the next day scoring 7. I thought that's going to be
1 to 15.
That's Jordan Poole summed up there. But I mean, you as a franchise, you're going to have to start building some sort of respectability, and whether you're just driving up Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma's value around the league to make a future package, if they're going to be a cornerstone of whatever. Detroit Pistons, I mean, you've drafted guard after guard after guard now, but you've got a lot of young assets, and Monty Williams is signing to a huge contract, so it's time to start actually figuring out who's going to be part of your future. And Charlotte, I mean, you just gave LaMelo Ball this contract. You use a second pick on Brandon Miller when people are saying he should have gone Scoot. And to me, and then so they're the 3 worst teams. Then everyone else has reason to want to win this year. Whether you're just building a culture, whether you're actually in some teams are ticking time bombs on there, like we just talked about Philly on there. So, I mean, to me, in terms of blatant tanking, even especially because there's a weak draft class coming up. Obviously, it's too early, and who knows? There's always a random guy that pops out of nowhere that we didn't see. But to me, I think this will be the first season in a long time where we won't see teams blatantly attacking. We'll actually watch teams want to win. Players, whether it's their pride to win individual awards. I'm kind of looking forward to it. I still don't understand the NBA Cup all that much, exactly how it works, but I think players will get amongst it just to be a part of it. So just compared to other seasons and all that stuff, I'm starting to have a bit of hope for the regular season, and I know that you want that for being an NBA content creator yourself.
No, I think you're right to an extent. Like, the level of tanking will be nowhere near what we've seen in previous years, and there's no number one overall pick like Victor Wembanyama that teams will be desperate to get their hands on this season. So you're right in that aspect, but I don't think there's not going to be a complete elimination of tanking. Like, there will be some element of it. I think there's going to be some element of it in every NBA season that ever exists, because at the end of the day, the 9th spot to the 13th spot in the conference, or 9th to 12th kind of thing, is the complete dead spot that no one wants to be in. And so I think teams that are going to be semi-competitive early in the season, I could see a Washington being semi-competitive early in the season with Poole, with Kuzma, with a consistent point guard like Tyus Jones. I really like Bilal Coulibaly, but at some point there's going to be a time where, hey, Tyus Jones, you're not on the team anymore. We've just traded you for a draft pick or two. DeLon Wright, you're not on the team anymore because we've just traded you for a pick or two. Maybe some team comes in with a huge offer for Kuzma, and they're like, well, we don't really see Kuz as part of our absolute, championship future kind of thing, so we move him now for assets. So there's going to be teams like the Wizards, like the Pistons, who have got Bogdanovich and Joe Harris, who's somehow now on Detroit. It's quite incredible. But there's going to be teams like that, right, who might be semi-competitive early, but by the trade deadline, it's going to be like, no, we're going to get off some of our veteran pieces here. Some of our pieces that are actually contributing to winning, we're going to get them out of here, and we're going to try and lose as many games as we can down the final stretch of the season.
It's definitely, yeah, let me never go away. There's always some subtle hints of tanking. Yeah, the depths of tanking that we've got to these past few years was semi-embarrassing, I think. And I think, especially with the depth of talent, there'll be so many competitive games early on, and we haven't even, there'll be guys that jump out of nowhere that we haven't even thought about. So, mate, I always say it every year, I'm so excited for this season, but my God, this season is going to be something else, and I can't wait to unpack it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I just finally on that tanking point, I remember actually doing a article at the corresponding time last year when we were kind of, the Wemby hype was really starting to build and stuff. And I was kind of looking at teams who might or would tank last season, and I had 7 or 8 teams. There was a shit ton of teams that you're they're just going to tank here and try and get Wemby. And maybe it actually, teams like the Jazz actually were pretty competitive kind of thing. And so maybe it wasn't 7, 8 teams in the end, but there were quite a few, obviously, that wanted to get in the Wemby sweepstakes. And, that won't be the case this season. Anything else from you quickly? Lastly, predictions for Wednesday's games, our time, Tuesday night, American time. The Lakers and the Nuggets, and the Warriors and the Suns. Who are winning those ones?
I'm going to go the Nuggets to beat the Lakers, and I'm going to go the Suns to beat your Warriors. Unfortunately, mate, I don't want to betray you. So,
and that's the end of our conversation. We hope we hope you have a great week ahead, Lee. I hope your Miami Heat start 0-10, and there's really pressure on the franchise, and you look even crapper after not getting Damian Lillard. So you're dead to me after that comment on the Suns beating the Warriors. But whatever, we'll see you on the next episode.